Hello, you wonderful people. So for today's video, this video is going to start off with like a random question, and I'll kind of elaborate later on. But that is like, do you think that grounded superheroes should stay grounded? Now, what I mean by that is, obviously, like when you take let's take something like Marvel and DC, and it's something I never really thought about too much growing up, but obviously, like, there are a lot of superheroes in the Marvel and DC universe who are very grounded, that there is some reality to them. Like, let's take the Arrowverse, for example, and it's something I've kind of brought up in the podcast when I've talked about it. Like, amongst the superhero shows that are out, like, on, like, the CW and the Arrowverse, Arrow is the most grounded in a sense of it's just regular people just going all vigilante, like, very Batman-like. Yeah, you have tools, and yes, your skills might seem like superhuman in certain regards, but you're very grounded. But you compare that to the other shows, whereas like Flash is very science fictional, it's the meta-human show, or Supergirl, which is kind of the alien show, and then Legends of Tomorrow, which is the time-traveling show, and even like Black Lightning will be grounded probably in certain aspects of it, but more so kind of being like Flash, the meta-human show in certain regards. So my question is, like, do you think those type of heroes like Green Arrow should stay grounded? Because the DC universe in itself is very expansive in the sense of like, oh, they are both, you know, it has a bit of groundedness to it as well as sci-fi and fantasy, but like the show itself was always structured to be very grounded. Like I said, it obviously it's exaggerated reality, but there is like realism to it, you know, to a certain degree. But obviously, like in season 4 is the one where it really popped up of like, oh yeah, there's also like magic in the DC universe. It's the first show to really feature that, like amongst the Arrowverse, obviously. But I mean, technically it did it before in season 3 when they introduced like the whole League of Assassins, Ra's al Ghul, and the whole Lazarus Pit situation, because that's still supernatural, but they really dived into magic being a thing in season 4. But subsequently, since, they haven't really tackled it, just because for a lot of people, I think a lot of people didn't really like that particular season because of that, because it wasn't what the show was really known for. And that brings up the question of like, should things that are grounded to a certain extent stay grounded? But that's, once again, the DC universe is filled with magic and like craziness. Like, there's been a few occasions where meta-humans have crossed over into Arrow, but that's like to the furthest they've ever really gone beyond that again, you know? So they try to keep it like these are regular people with just somewhat superhuman skills to a certain extent, you know? I mean, once again, using the example of Batman, like Batman is just a regular dude. Like, his superpower is being super rich. But the fact of the matter is like, he does have his skills and everything, but he himself goes up against like enemies from different backgrounds, you know? Is it simply because the show structured itself as just being like, oh no, there's realism to it? Like, if it from the very beginning had been like, oh yeah, there's all this wackiness in it, like, you know? Cause I feel like, you know, Gotham has kind of done that to a certain extent too, but I think it works for Gotham. I'm curious why. I mean, that's just my opinion. I'd love to get yours about it. I've talked about it recently when I did a nerd mode on it. Was like the first season very like straightforward crime drama. Then season 2 started introducing more concepts, like the more science fictional side of, you know, the DC universe, in particular Gotham, with a lot of like more science fictional based villains that, you know, Batman faces, it, you know, at points throughout his history. And then obviously season 3 as well as season 4 currently are kind of tackling the more supernatural side of things too, which much like Arrow, the introduction of the League of Assassins, Shadows, whatever you want to call them, as well as Ra's al Ghul, however you want to go about it, and the whole Lazarus Pit thing. Kind of a flip side to that would be kind of like the Marvel equivalency, and that's the whole Defender situation that's going on Netflix. Amongst all 4 heroes, I mean, technically all 4 shows are grounded to a certain extent, but I feel like out of any of them, maybe Daredevil is the most grounded, even though he has his superhuman abilities, because the other shows don't shy away from like their like science fiction or supernatural sides, but they don't take, like for example, like Iron Fist, you can't get around the more supernatural magic side to it. I mean, granted, it's not going all Doctor Strange on you. What I mean by that, it's like Iron Fist steps in the supernatural side of things, but the fact of the matter is he can use the Iron Fist, and obviously there's a little bit of supernaturalness to the show, but it doesn't go like as crazy as like, you know, full-blown magic as like Doctor Strange did. And I guess it makes sense too, because when you take something like the other shows like Jessica Jones and Luke Cage, they're all still grounded too, because it's not like, I mean, to a certain extent, because the whole point about those Netflix shows are they're not supposed to be too big. I mean, because even if you compare it to something like Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. is like, no, it's not too grounded. It's like, yo, you got this science fictional stuff happening all over the place. Because like you take Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. for example, it started off very like, this is a very science fictional show. And even when they introduced Inhumans, it didn't change too much of the structure of the show because it dealt with people with abilities as well as like, you know, things outside of the quote-unquote normal realm. So I think it's kind of an example of kind of like, if you started off like doing it one way, then it'll be okay if you continue down that road and expand upon that world a little bit more, like I said, with the introduction of Inhumans. So, and even taking something like Daredevil kind of steps into that supernatural realm as well, to a certain extent when it introduced the Hand in season 2, but it never went too far into that realm. It's just kind of like, oh, there's a little bit of a supernatural stuff here because people who died didn't stay dead, so there's that whole aspect to it as well. Like I said, like ultimately my question is, do you think that should a show from the very beginning be like, okay, introducing you to like a world of like, oh, this is magic and science fiction in this? Like, should superhero shows do that going forward? But if they're trying to do an Arrow thing and they start off grounded, should they stay grounded? Or do you think it's just a situation of properly handling it? Like, you know, maybe it should be a more, like I said, because to me, in my opinion, like I liked season 4, which I don't know, maybe because I'm not saying they'd never do it again, but maybe they'd be more hesitant to kind of tap into the more magic side. You know, because some people are like, oh yeah, like Arrow is the grounded show. It should stay the grounded show. It should just be like, okay, we're fighting regular people who have extraordinary skills. We'll leave metahumans for the Flash, aliens for Supergirl, which all kind of get interesting, which kind of gets a little all interesting when you consider the fact that there's crossover between them, in a sense of like last year there was a Heroes versus Aliens where all 4 shows came together to fight aliens. That's just where my mind is on that. I'd love to get, you know, your thoughts about it. You know, like, how do you think, is there a way to properly balance that, or do you think once a show is one way, it should stay that way just for, not just continuity's sake, but just for the sake of like, this is the way the show is structured, it fits more with this show's vibe and design, I guess. I don't know, like I said, I'm not properly explaining this well, so I do apologize. I'd love to also know like what you think is the show that kind of does it the best, that kind of it started off grounded and then like kind of expanded upon it in a way that you feel like it wasn't too forced, or it kind of took you out of the show. Like, I'd love to know your thoughts about everything. So, but really, that's all I want to talk about in this video. Till the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and goodbye.